If you were able to walk into a room, confident that you would be well received, seen, heard, and appreciated by others, and all it took was a few changes in how you navigate your everyday relationships, would you be willing to make those changes? It is possible to be both fully authentic and to experience the best relationships of your life. Now, here's the host of Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone.
Welcome everyone to this episode of Navigating Complicated Relationships. Once again, I'm looking at the complicated relationship with food. This time though, I'm looking at it from the angle of gut health. Now that might not sound very sexy and interesting, but I assure you, if you don't have gut health, you're really aware of just how interesting it is. So what exactly do I mean by gut health? Well, it's first of all, the parts we're talking about is everything from your mouth to your backside. That's all the digestive process. And that area serves as your immune system as well. Did you know that your immune system was mostly housed in the gut? A lot of people don't know that. They're not aware of it. And if they were, they might take a little more care of that particular system. So I'm a human behavior expert, as you know, or you do if you've been listening to me. I'm also a nutrition coach and certified with a company called Precision Nutrition. They're very well known, particularly in Canada. And I'm also learning more and more about digestive wellness every day in yet another course that I'm doing. So this is something that I'm really up and interested in. And if you know anything about autoimmune conditions, or if your health is just a little bit off or certain foods bother you, this episode is for you. And I have something that might be surprising for you to learn about celiac disease later, but I'm not going to get into that just yet. I want to look more at what exactly happens if you don't have gut health, right? So autoimmune diseases, as I just mentioned, you can have mental health disorders and metabolic disorders. Now, what do I mean by those two? Well, mental health, if you think of depression and anxiety, depression is often treated with a medication called SSRI, which is serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So serotonin is produced in the gut. And if your gut is not working very well, you don't have a whole lot of the happy hormones, right? So did you know that was made in the gut, by the way? Because that wasn't something I've always known. I fairly recently got to know that. I always thought it was, produced somewhere else. Didn't really know where. So if you have poor gut health, then your serotonin levels are going to be messed with. And if your serotonin levels aren't very good, chances are that shows up in the form of depression. So if you can track your food using a journal and track your symptoms of depression, if this is something you have now and then, you might find something very interesting about the food you're eating and your gut health. And I think that's very well worth learning, don't you? And you can learn it for yourself. So if you want to know about the symptoms that happen during poor gut health, we're going to be getting into that. So the gut microbiota, or the gut microbiome, is basically the environment of the gut, right? And it has a whole lot of microorganisms in there, little critters that happily live in your gut and are supposed to be there. There's bacteria, which is good bacteria. There's viruses. Yeah, I said that. And there's fungi. And there's something called archaea, or archaea, I believe. And these are particularly in the colon. And they change. The ratios change, and what types are there change depending on the foods you eat. And this is something very interesting to know if you're changing your diet in some way. The system you have in your gut that is there to handle the food is the system that's put there to handle the food you've already eaten. So if you're changing how you eat, then be prepared for things to be a little out of whack for a week or two, because you have a new system coming in, and your body has to kind of figure out, well, what do I need in here to work through this particular kind of food? So if you're someone who likes to try fad diets, for example, and yeah, okay, so using the word fad is likely to make you say, I don't do that. But if you try different diets to lose weight, for example, then every time you start that new process, things have to change in your gut. And sometimes that can be helpful, and sometimes that can give you some pretty unpleasant symptoms, right? You get what could be termed a different bathroom experience, which you might not like very much. So if that happens to you, be aware that your body's just trying to keep up with the different things you're trying. And frankly, if you're using diets that have products and chemical concoctions in the name of protein shakes or something, if there's a lot of chemicals in there, your poor body, especially your gut, has no way of handling that properly. It can't digest what's not digestible. So if you're consuming chemicals, and I'm not going to call it eating because food is eaten, chemicals are consumed, and if you have those in your system, then your body's just going to look at them and say, well, I don't know, what do I do with this? Where does this go? And sometimes you'll hear a person say, well, if you take vitamins and you don't need them, you'll just pee them out, right? It's an interesting notion, but I don't think so, because your kidneys are the filtration system. And okay, that's not part of the gut, and we're diversifying just a little for a moment here, but it all ties in. So your kidneys are the filtration system. Think of how big they are. Think of the likely size of blood vessel, right? Even if you're not sort of down on all of your anatomy, it can't be that big, right? So how much is going to get filtered through that? And when your kidneys try, how much is a good thing? So if you're taking supplements that have chemicals in, if it gets as far as the kidneys, and chances are it won't, but if it does, your kidneys are really going to be hard put to. And there is a lot of kidney disease around these days. I'm wondering if the two are connected, and I'm going to leave that question to you to consider. Do you think they might be? Could be, right? So be aware if you're trying these sort of food diet things that have non-foods in there, so you're going on a special way of eating, and then suddenly you notice there's a whole lot of products that have that name on, like you can have keto potato chips or whatever it is, right? That one's just out of the air. But if you have those kind of products, that's not real food that you're eating. Stuff has been done to it, it's been processed, and so your body says, yeah, I don't know what to do with this. Your gut microbiome, that whole environment just says, yeah, not sure, here, let's get rid of it. And you can end up with inflammation from that process, right? From your body trying to figure out what to do with these chemicals. Now, why is inflammation important? Well, if you have inflammation going on, then you end up with something called leaky gut syndrome, which I'll get into more in a little bit. But basically what you need to know about that for the moment is that when the walls of the gut are inflamed, they kind of stretch a little like that. If you're watching, you can see what I'm doing with my hands. That means that what was really small holes just became a whole heap bigger. And that means that stuff is getting in through those holes that shouldn't be. Your body is having a sort of flood of some nutrients, some non-nutrients, but things that go into the abdomen and around the body that shouldn't be there. And so your system says, whoa, something is out of line here. This is not right. Immune system attack. And you start developing this whole autoimmune cycle. And it can show up in any number of ways. It depends on where you're starting from, what you're susceptible to, and what you're eating. But can you see how that process works? If you cause inflammation by eating non-foods, then you're going to have that space for bigger particles not just nutrients, but bigger stuff that the body then says, hey, this isn't supposed to be here. And I need to deal with this. And the body will literally start attacking itself, which is what autoimmune means. So if you want to avoid that, you might want to pay attention to your gut health. Now, what else does it do? Well, the gut breaks down dietary fibers, carbohydrates, things that you can't digest. There's a type of carbohydrate that you cannot digest. And it also produces enzymes and short chain fatty acids. These are things that you need to support your gut health. So just know that those are all good things and you need that to be happening. Okay. Then nutrient metabolism, meaning it helps to make certain nutrients, right? So, and those are vitamins, for example, vitamin K or the B vitamins. Now, B vitamins are really good at helping to regulate your moods. So if you're somebody who has, you're happy one minute, crying in a corner the next, and you're not quite sure why, one of the first things I would suggest you try is taking some B complex. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm just speaking from experience, but B complex can really help. And meanwhile, book an appointment with your therapist or your doctor, whichever you have that's looking after you. But taking B vitamins in the meantime won't hurt at all, and it could help. If your mood swings are kind of mild, they're not too bad, then B might be the answer, so to speak. So this is how important the gut is, right? And it's also, as it's your immune system, it's what helps keep you healthy. So if you find that you get a lot of colds, a lot of sort of rundown problems going on, you might want to look at and pay attention to what's happening in your gut. What's your food experience like? Because really, the big part of helping your gut be healthy is eating real food and not stuff out of a box or a packet, wherever possible. You do the best with what you can. I have a client right now that lives in a food desert. Now, if you're not in the US, you might have the blessing of not knowing what that is. But a food desert is where you don't have a real grocery store within reasonable reach, like half an hour's reach or walking distance or, something, half an hour's reach, right? So I have a client that her best sort of grocery store nearby is a dollar store. Now just imagine what you buy at a dollar store. Now they do have some vegetables there, but they're kind of put really high up so you can't see them unless you're stretching for them. And there's an awful lot of chemical stuff that's right there at eye level. And so people living in that area, that's their main source of food, which is mind-blowing to anybody that doesn't live in that sort of area. Can you imagine what the health is like of most of that population? I bet you can, right? And I'll bet the medical services could tell you too. And why is all of that happening? It's food industry messing with food and turning it into a product. The product doesn't bear any resemblance to what your body recognizes as food. So when you change things, it becomes a problem. Did you know that corn, for example, has been altered? It's a hybrid now of different gene splicing has gone on, let's put it that way. And so the plant is more hardy, it's not going to get beaten down by the rain, and it's insect repellent, natural, like it has an insect repellent in it. So if an insect bites it, it's going to die. Now that should scare you. And it has like 5% of the corn's DNA is alien to that corn. It is not of that corn. So when that gets into your body, what your body sees is, this isn't made the way corn's supposed to be made. I don't know what this is. And you can't negotiate with your body. It's either nutrients or it isn't. And when you start messing with stuff, you start with the GMO and making stuff hybrid, the body doesn't recognize it anymore, particularly when you bring other things in. It's not the same plant cross-pollinated, it's different stuff coming in. And this is happening all the time now to our food, what was our food. So even some of the things that are being grown, you can't be sure are okay. So next time you have that corn on the cob, look at where you got it from. And is it one of those sort of short, stout, hardy plants? If it is, you might want to not, because your body's going to have a hard time with that. On that delightful note, we have a break coming up, so please don't go away. Stay tuned, and I have more goodies for you coming after the break. Don't go away.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to mickey@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm delighted you're still here listening to me, your host, Michaela Gaffen Stone, and we're on the Inspired Choices Network. And you can find this podcast, Navigating Complicated Relationships, on any number of podcast platforms. So what's your favorite one? You could find us on Audible as well, or iHeartRadio, Spotify. There's any number of places. So find your favorite place. Look for Navigating Complicated Relationships, and then subscribe, and then you never need to miss an episode. You can also let me know any questions that you have, any comments, subjects that you would like explored that are kind of complicated, because there's so many, and food in particular gets more and more complicated by the day because of the food industry and the things it's doing to the stuff it sells you. So one clue is if it has to be labeled food, then it isn't, because you don't see carrots or broccoli or, any vegetables. You don't see a label over the top of them saying food, right? It's the vegetable or the produce section, right? It's not labeled food. Where you see that label, it typically means it's processed stuff, and do yourself a big favor and don't. So let me look at another aspect right now of the gut health, and that's metabolic health, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, the gut influences metabolic processes. So that includes how your body deals with sugar and fat, okay? Now, this is really important right now because that contributes to the development of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome, which is like pre-diabetes, right? You have a bunch of things going on, such as high blood pressure, your blood sugar's a little off, and maybe your, let's see what else would be going on with that. You have a few things with that. Maybe your kidneys are showing signs of strain. The doctor will soon tell you if you have pre-diabetes. But all of this shows up when your gut health is out of whack. So rather than fixing the symptom, have a look at the problem, which is what you're eating and what it's doing to your body, right? So this might sound a bit overwhelming. Where do I begin? What do you mean? You've already said these diets are no good, so what's good? Well, hey, I'm so glad you asked. What's good is knowing which whole foods work for you and which ones don't. And there's a process for you to learn that. And there's ways for you to detox from sugar. And yes, I mean detox. It is the other white powder. You can detox from sugar without suffering all of the headaches, the cravings, the bad tempers, all of those things. There's a system for that. And it doesn't involve taking any chemicals or doing anything strange and unusual. It is a 90-day program, and it's one that I'm currently coaching. We're on week 7 of 13 right now. And the people that are going through this coaching process with me are having some amazing results. They're learning all kinds of things about their relationships with food, and on an emotional level, and also on a level of, oh, I used to feel like this all the time, and now I realize that that's actually not very good. When I don't eat that food, I feel much better. Who knew? Now, you've heard of elimination diets before, but they're often a very rushed business, right? Because there's a concern that, well, if you don't like it, you might not keep doing it. Fair, that's quite true. Unless you really are aware of how important your health is, then you'd keep going anyway. But what if there was a system where you could learn all the things you need to know about your body and how it responds to food, and you could figure out which ones work for you, which foods work for you, and you could do that in a very comfortable way that's a systematic process, and be fully supported as you go along. That's what I do. That's what I'm doing right now. And in fact, that's what I'm moving all of my focus to, because it's such important work and people are getting such benefit from it. Weight loss is definitely a likelihood in this case, but it's more of a side effect than the intention. The intention is to get you in control of your food so that you know which ones work for you and which ones don't. Now, if you're wondering, what is she talking about? Then 1, I haven't been very clear, and I'm sorry about that. And 2, let me give you an example. So for me, I discovered doing the process I'm talking about now that white potato, is really not my friend. Now, I love baked potatoes and I love French fries. I enjoy those foods, but they don't like me, and I don't feel very good at all if I eat those. So now that I've learned that, and I definitely know it's the potato, I can just look at a beautiful baked potato that's mouth-wateringly good and say, no, thank you. I don't want that. I don't want to pay the price. And it's not a willpower thing, because it's a learned thing. I now know what that's going to do to me. So that's the kind of process I'm talking about. You learn a whole lot about you, food, and how you two get along, and where you don't. So it's really important to take care of your gut health, and that's your path to doing it. It's not swallowing a bunch of pills and taking meds for the next however many years. That medication sometimes is necessary. Yes, there's no question. Of course it is. And we need doctors, absolutely. But if you can do self-care before healthcare, how good is that? You're going to relieve the overburdened healthcare system, and you're going to be in control of your health. You're going to be in charge of how you work and when you rest and so on. You're not going to have a disease in charge of that, right? Wouldn't you rather take a break because you wanted to than because your body said, yeah, I'm going to collapse on you now. I don't like the way you've been treating me. There's a very, big difference there. Now, the gut is also called the second brain because it plays such an important role in the body. It has a crucial role in processes further than digestion. For example, the immune system, we've already mentioned that. And it's sort of, if you can't think clearly if your gut isn't working properly, right? Let's put it that way. So anxiety, depression, I've mentioned those, stress-related conditions. There's chronic disease that comes up from this as well. And we've mentioned a couple of them already, like leaky gut, and I mentioned celiac. But all of this is to do with the food you eat affecting your gut, which affects all of your life. Because I assure you, if your gut isn't working well, then everything else is kind of put on the back burner a little bit while it takes your attention. And inflammation in the body, which often will, I can't prove it starts in the gut, but let's just say it's likely to, then, that inflammation is the cause, the origin of most of the big diseases today that kill people, such as heart attacks, strokes, dementia. All of these appear to come from, they're correlated to inflammation. There's a lot of evidence out there for it, actually, but I often stick my neck out. I just don't want to go too far today with that. So foods that you eat, a variety of them. Fiber rich is often good, depending on where the fiber comes from. And you also need to make sure that if you take antibiotics, an hour and a half to 2 hours, either before or after the antibiotic, have a probiotic as well. Because your doctors should be telling you this, they know this, but not all doctors will tell you. I'm aware of that. So the reason for this is antibiotics are like taking buckshot to kill a sparrow. It's a lot, and they just wipe everything out. So you need the good bacteria in your gut, as I mentioned earlier. While you're taking antibiotics, you need to kind of try and keep a bit of a balance by taking probiotics. And if you don't, the symptoms that you're likely to get after that, depending on your current health, you can end up with a yeast infection, you can end up with diarrhea, you can get both, you can have stomach pains galore, and all of that is because the antibiotics wiped everything out. So that's something you need to know, even if your doctor doesn't tell you, is get the good quality probiotics. And if you can get a pretty broad one, that should, again, the buckshot approach, but that should get you wherever you currently are. I mean, we all eat differently, so what kind of bacteria you have will vary as well from person to person. So the gut also will, as I mentioned, regulate your moods. I mean, how important is that? It's just so important for your overall health that I'd like you to think about what you eat now and where could you improve that? Where would you be willing to improve that? And if you're not willing to improve it, then I would be very curious about that if I were you. Maybe you could get a journal and start writing out what you think about when you think about that particular food. For example, I'll have some clients say, I'm not giving up my coffee. Okay, why? And what is the story with the coffee? Like, is it really essential to get you going in the morning? That's an addiction, right? If that's the case, do you want to be addicted? And is it really the flavor? Would it work for you if it was decaf? There's a lot of questions to ask. And I would be very curious around any food, particularly if you suspect that it's not sort of helping you, then what's the story around why you wouldn't want to give it up? Just out of curiosity. You might learn something interesting if you write a whole lot about that. What thoughts come up? Nobody else is looking at it. It's just, it's you, it's for your eyes. So I suggest what's called a stream of consciousness writing, where you just start writing and stuff will come out and it could surprise you by page 2. So that's a question for you when considering your gut health is, what are you eating or drinking and where could you improve that? And would you need help with that? Think about these things while we're on the next break, because we're already there, and let me know what you think. You can send an email to me and I'll give you my email address again after the break. Don't go away. You are listening to Navigating Complicated Relationships.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to mickey@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Michaela Gaffen Stone, and I'm here on the Inspired Choices Network, and this is Navigating Complicated Food Relationships. My email, if you would like to message me and ask me questions or ask me about the coaching program that I run, that would be cool too. I'm happy to talk about it. The email is Mickey, M-I-K-K-I, at Gaffen, G-A-F-F-E-N, Stone, S-T-O-N-E.com. So email me, or you can find me on Facebook. I'm there a fair bit. LinkedIn and Instagram a little less often, but I do show up there. So these are all places you can find me. And Michaela Gaffen Stone is, I believe I'm the only one out there with that name. So pretty easy to find. Now, before the break, we were talking about the different things that happen when your gut health isn't good. And there was a caution about when you're taking antibiotics to make sure you have probiotics, not at the same time. If you take them at the same time, the antibiotic will wipe that out as well. So leave it an hour and a half to 2 hours and then have your probiotic. Okay, so that's kind of important to know. Most doctors will say that these days, but again, not all of them do in my experience. So it's well documented. If you're not sure about that, look up Google Scholar and you'll find some articles on it. Okay, so here's a surprising thing, or it might be surprising to you if you have sleep problems or sleep apnea. Sometimes the inflammation that comes from an upset gut, and I don't mean immediately upset, but just chronically inflamed, that can end up giving you insomnia and it can give you sleep apnea. Isn't that wild? Now, would you rather have a sleep apnea machine, or would you rather fix the problem, right, with food, which is within your realm to fix? You don't need a prescription for that. So if this is something that made you sit up and say, what? I'm kind of tired, but did she say insomnia? I did. It could be a cause. Do you have any concerns about that? I'm happy to talk to you, or you could go talk to your doctor and ask them about a potential link. And they may or may not know. It really depends on where you live and what kind of school your doctor went to. So the things I've mentioned so far really highlight why it's important. But let's go to some specifics now. Have you heard of leaky gut syndrome? It's kind of contentious right now, with some people saying it doesn't exist, it's not a thing. And others have known for quite some time that, yes, it's very definitely a thing. And if you have it, you know it's a thing. And to reiterate what I said earlier on, it's when the lining of your intestine is inflamed and it kind of, the membrane that kind of holds together spreads apart a little bit with that inflammation, and then you get holes there for bigger particles than food to go through. Those irritate your system and alerts the body to something being in the wrong place, the wrong thing, and it will send an immune system attack, right? And that's where you can get food allergies from too. If you think about it, it really makes sense, right? So if you have something that you eat a lot or you eat frequently and it keeps leaking into your gut, you're going to end up with some very specific immune system cells targeting that. And that's going to give you some allergies or some sensitivities, right? So that gut, that lining acts as a barrier to keep the nutrients sort of going through in an orderly manner and keep the rest of the stuff out of there, the toxins, the undigested food. But those things can leak through when you have an inflamed and more open gut wall. So that can lead to symptoms like, well, I said inflammation, which is more of a thing than a symptom, but the symptoms: bloating, gas, diarrhea, fatigue, joint pain, headaches, and skin problems. Do you have any of those? Is this something that's been going on for you for quite a while? Some of the biggest factors that contribute to leaky gut, that's known to contribute, are diets high in processed foods, especially the ultra processed food, chronic stress, too much alcohol, and medications such as the over-the-counter non-steroidal anti-inflammatories or NSAIDs, right? So, and genetics can play a part. But the thing with genetics is, if you think of it like a big board of light switches, right? All of the light switches are your genetics. Epigenetics are this sort of little detail that sit on top of the light switch, and that will determine whether the light is switched on or off. So if your gene is turned on or off. So you might have a predisposition to diabetes, say it runs in the family, but you don't have to have diabetes because it runs in the family. You just need to be aware of that and not flip the switch that would give you diabetes, right? It might be sitting there, but you don't have to turn it on. And it's, again, the food that you eat that will make a huge difference to whether that gets turned on or not, and how you handle stress, and whether you live in a state of chronic stress. So any stress reduction techniques that you can use, along with improving your diet, will all help. So getting enough sleep is really useful. But of course, if you have a gut problem, you might have insomnia, right? I mentioned that earlier. So again, look at your digestive system health, basically, and avoid triggers like alcohol and certain medications. And you'll know which ones those are way better than I could tell you. I could sit here and rattle off a bunch of names, and I don't know. You would know, though. There are digestive enzymes that you can buy, and those can help. And certainly in the short term, while you're overcoming some symptoms. But again, you really want to fix the problem rather than fix the symptom, right? That's just putting a Band-Aid over a bleeding artery. You might not want to do that. It doesn't work very well, and it doesn't work for very long. So, former nurse here, I can tell you, you wouldn't want to do that. So what else is there? I've mentioned a whole bunch of symptoms, but fatigue, feeling tired or even exhausted. Even, this is key, even after getting enough sleep. If you're sleeping well and you still wake up exhausted, or you're even more tired when you wake up than when you went to bed, then you may have a leaky gut, right? That could be. Joint pain. Some people will have joint pain or stiffness, which they might think is arthritis, but there's no actual diagnosis of arthritis, right? It can be mistaken for that. It feels like the joints are all seizing up, but actually it's your leaky gut syndrome that's saying, hey, we're not happy over here. We're not getting the right food, and you have a leaky system going. You got to fix this. And it takes time, and it takes good food. So chronic headaches or migraines can be linked to a leaky gut. Isn't it amazing how far-reaching this is? But just think how long, how big that whole system is. It's like 22 feet of intestines. So yeah, it has a lot to do. It has a big role in your body, and you might want to look after it while it's doing that. Another thing you can find is skin problems, acne, eczema, psoriasis, they can worsen or flare up. So if this is something you're already prone to, chances are you will have more of them, and it'll be more evident if you develop leaky gut syndrome, right? And I already mentioned the food sensitivities and intolerances, particularly if those are difficult to digest. Autoimmune disorders, again, that's the body attacking itself, right? And why would the body attack itself? Because there are things that are in the wrong place. There are particles getting into the wrong place. So not everybody agrees on this, but I'm going to present this to you today as I think it's linked, and there are others that agree with me, and there are others that don't. So you take this and consider it for yourself, okay? But there are researchers who believe that there is a link between leaky gut and autoimmune conditions such as celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, or even Crohn's disease, which is a pretty heavy triad of conditions, right? Those, if you have those, you really know you've got them. And mood issues, anxiety and depression, I mentioned, brain fog, or difficulty concentrated. If you can't concentrate, you may have leaky gut. You might not have ADHD, right? Particularly if it hasn't always been an issue for you. So these are things to consider. Then there's a condition called SIBO, or bacterial overgrowth in the gut, known as small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. And that happens when the small intestine has a sort of bacteria explosion, if you will, and the overgrowth can lead to all kinds of symptoms and complications. So digestive issues like bloating, gas, you really get a sort of, your belly will increase significantly in a fairly short space of time. That's one of the symptoms. Diarrhea or constipation can be a common symptom too. And these occur because the excessive bacteria will ferment, can you imagine, the foods in the small intestine. And that's not what's supposed to happen there. So you really want to be aware of what I'm talking about here. And then nutritional deficiencies can happen because vitamins A, D, E, and K, these are all, interfered with by bacterial overgrowth. They're fat-soluble vitamins, and they just have a particular path that they need to follow. And if you have a bacterial overgrowth, that's not going to go well. You can also get malabsorption, which means you're eating all the right things, or you're taking your supplements and you're eating the foods that you normally eat, but somehow it's not getting better, even though you added more supplements. Well, that can be because you're just not absorbing what you're eating. It's going through the gut that fast, it doesn't have time to absorb, and you've got inflammation going on, which means everything's out of shape and things aren't being absorbed where they need to be absorbed. So all of that can be an issue. Isn't it wild that we have these things going on? And then reflux and heartburn, that can be caused by too much bacteria in the small intestine. Did you know that? You might have thought it was just the spicy burrito you ate, but actually it's not only that. It's what else is going on in your system already. And that's why that condition would repeat, pardon me, but it would. That would repeat because the problem is always there. The trigger is the food. Did you think of it that way before? Because when you look at the advertisements, particularly in the US, for medications, it's kind of implied that the issue is that particular food and it's because it's spicy, or that particular food, never mind, here, take these pills. But that's not all it is, right? You have other things going on. I'll get into a little bit more detail. I did promise I'd look at celiac for you, and this is interesting. You might have something going on that you're not aware of. So listen up, listen in, and make some notes. I will catch you after the break in just a minute's time. Don't go away.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to Mickey@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm delighted you're still here and still listening to me. Are you making notes like crazy, or are you just going to wait and then listen to the podcast later and maybe pause and make some notes? If you have any questions, I would love for you to contact me and ask me, Mickey, M-I-K-K-I, at gaffenstone.com. And I am very responsive. I will answer your emails. Next week, we're on a bit of a theme here. Next week's show is called What You Need to Know About Healthy Eating. So you can see that this is definitely a passion of mine. And a big reason for that is because having discovered, having experienced, and having learned, studied that food makes all the difference. Food isn't medicine. You need medicine when your food isn't good, right? That's what happens. And if you look at statistics from around the world, and yes, statistics can be fiddled with to say anything, but if you look at them for all sorts of countries and see where the US is on their health, on general population health, it's not great. It's really not good at all. And neither is Canada particularly, although not as bad as the US. And the UK is right in there with just growing ill health and rising levels of obesity. Now, my concern with obesity isn't anything to do with what it looks like, what I think about the person, because I know obesity typically comes from being overfed and undernourished. It's not a greed thing, right? Your body is getting all these calories coming in and it's not getting the nutrients because it's processed food. So your body says, yeah, okay, you ate. I still need these things. Can you please eat? And so it wants that person to keep eating. The hunger doesn't go away because the nutrients aren't there. And your body will keep telling you to eat. So people get bigger and bigger and bigger as the nutritional content of their food goes down and down and down. And you can thank the food companies for that. And I would love you to thank them by not buying their rubbish. That would be really good. So Whole Foods are the name of the game. And you'll hear more about that next week. I did promise that I'd tell you some things that I found to be interesting about celiac, because you tend to think, or at least I did, that if somebody has celiac disease, they really know about that and it's a big deal. And, you're very, very delicate and so on. But there's a lot of space between reality and that view that I had of celiac. So it's triggered by the consumption of gluten, which is a wheat protein. It's also in barley and it's also in rye. So if you look at any manufactured food product, you'll see that at least one of those is likely to be in there. And frankly, I think corn is now a problem for most people with celiac as well, because of the genetic modifications, the pesticides, and so on. So when a person with celiac has gluten, their immune system reacts by damaging the lining of the small intestine. And that gives some symptoms and complications that you might be surprised by. Some you'll know, and some you might go, what? I have that. Think about it. So digestive issues, of course, like abdominal pain, bloating, gas, diarrhea, those kind of things. And they can vary in severity. It doesn't have to be doubling you over, but it can vary, right? Fatigue, just tired all the time, exhausted. Your nutrient absorption is off. you have malabsorption going on, and that will increase fatigue as well. Weight loss can happen, unintentional weight loss. So if you're somebody who has a problem with that, you might want to consider this as a possibility. It could be going on for you. But this is especially in children, right? The weight loss. And then anemia. Celiac disease can cause iron deficiency. And that's because of the inability to absorb everything, right? So that shows up as fatigue, weakness, pale skin, shortness of breath, and dizziness. Bone and joint pain. Did you know that that was part of the deal? And that osteoporosis too, right? Where your bones are weak, and all of that is due to malabsorption of calcium and vitamin D, and then skin problems such as dermatitis, little blistering itchy patches. It's called herpetiformis or something like that. Don't quote me. And all of those can happen with people with celiac, right? And mouth ulcers, especially for children, if they keep getting mouth ulcers, it's not a random thing. It's a sign that they have a problem with the food they're eating, and it's probably gluten. And then here's one that interested me, and I didn't know about these next couple of things, and that was delayed puberty or menstrual irregularities. So adolescents and adults with undiagnosed celiac might have those situations happening because of hormonal imbalances. And then infertility. Can you imagine infertility? That might be caused by celiac because you've got nutrient deficiencies and hormone imbalances. So this is huge. And even behavior changes, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, depression, all of those can happen with celiac because of the impact on the neurotransmitters, basically the chemicals that say, hey, do this, go there, be happy, and it's so important to know these things. Now, I didn't know a couple of those. How about you? Did you know everything I just told you about celiac? If you haven't, you might know. You still might not, honestly, because not everybody's going to have all of those symptoms. But if you've been spending some of your life in an uncomfortable way, where you just accept that that's how you feel, you accept that you're tired all the time, I invite you to consider that you may need to be doing some gut restoration, some gut health work. And yes, I have a program coming up for exactly that very soon. At the end of March, I'm going to be running a probably 4-week program on this one. It may go to 5. We'll see. And I'm beta testing it. So anybody that wants in on that should let me know. It will be a one-time low price to join, and you'll be getting some really good information about resetting your gut health. And after that, there's more programs if you're interested. But if you can only get your gut health in a good place, imagine how different your life will be. And you won't even need medications for it. Now, I'm not telling anybody who's on meds to stop them. Let me put that right out there. If that's between you and your doctor. But if food can help you, how great would that be? Wouldn't you love that? You can just change how you're eating, learn a new system that works for you, learn to maybe make your food at home so that you have control over it. If you're not much of a cook, I can help you with that too. So there's lots of possibilities coming up, and I invite you to consider what you recognize out of everything I've said today. What are you experiencing? Because I'll bet there's some of that. And just fixing your gut health by eating better will make all the difference to your overall health and your sense of well-being. And you can conquer the world from there, right? You can do so much if you feel good. On those days where you are energized and you're like, yes, I've got it going on, there's nothing that can stop you. But if you wake up tired, and then you go through aches and pains and you're having a hard day, like, you can't conquer anything. You can't conquer the sofa like that. So I would love for you to think about that. And if you're interested, just find me on Facebook, email me, send a message to Inspired Choices Network below this podcast. I will see you next week for more information about food.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Complicated Relationships show. Michaela returns Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, remember every relationship is a journey, and with the right tools, you can create stronger, more fulfilling connections.